In this world, a mysterious creature has always existed throughout humanity's billions of years of history. But it wasn't immortal. Every time it died, it would be reborn in a new form, carrying all the memories of its previous lives with it. Sometimes it became a fish living deep in the ocean. Sometimes an eagle ruling the skies. Sometimes a tiny ant marching behind its colony, and sometimes a gigantic dinosaur. No matter how much Earth changed, the dinosaurs went extinct, and the entire world transformed, that creature continued living through this endless cycle for billions of years. During this long journey, if there was anyone it hated the most, it was humans. Nature's rule was simple. The strong always defeated the weak. So whenever it was hunted or killed by a stronger creature, it felt normal to him. But humans were different. In his eyes, humans were the most disgusting species because they didn't kill only for survival, they also took lives for fun. He hated them. A deep, intense hatred. Even so, he could never stand against them because humans possessed weapons that kept evolving over time. That was the true power of Earth's top predator. Now the question was, would this hatred, accumulated over centuries, eventually push him to wipe out humanity, or would he become a powerful being who protects humanity instead? The story begins on the day that creature dies at the hands of humans once again. This time, he was an elephant. He wanted to die forever, but even after death, he felt the same pain again. The pain of reincarnation, so intense that it felt as if his entire body was being crushed. And the greater the pain, the higher the chance that his next life would be as an even more powerful creature. Across his countless lifetimes, he had never experienced such pain before. That was why he was extremely excited about his next rebirth. And sure enough, this time he was born as Earth's current top predator, a human. His mother named him Lee. For the first time in billions of years, he had a name from birth. But the moment he was born, he didn't cry. His mother would talk to him, but he would simply stare at her without speaking or reacting. Worried, his mother took him to a doctor. But all the reports were completely normal. He was perfectly healthy. The doctor suggested that perhaps she should take him to a psychologist. The moment she heard that, his mother became furious. She felt the doctor was calling her son mentally ill. In her eyes, Lee was the most precious thing in her life. Lee's mother's name was Youngshil. According to Lee, Youngshil was a little naive and arrogant. She had lost her family in a war. Then that same war took away her husband as well. To her, this world had been incredibly cruel. Yet she still had a reason to live, her son. She would often carry Lee on her back while selling vegetables in the market. Even after spending so much time with her, Lee still carried a deep hatred for humans. He still couldn't fully understand his mother's love. But her words, her behavior, and her touch made him feel warmth. And for the first time, he didn't hate a human. He began to feel that perhaps this life would be different from all the others. Then one night, in the darkness, some people were chasing a criminal far away from his house. Suddenly, they spotted Lee standing on top of a tall pole. They were stunned. How had such a small child gotten up there? But what happened next shocked them even more. Lee was about to test his abilities, and the timing was perfect. He thought about a frog, and in the very next moment, frog-like power flowed into his body. Without hesitation, he jumped down from the tall pole. Everyone was left speechless. Without saying a single word, Lee moved with the speed of a cheetah and the strength of a dinosaur. In the blink of an eye, he slammed a man to the ground. At that moment, he realized something. In this life, he didn't just possess his memories. He also possessed the powers of every creature he had ever lived as. The powers of the fish, the eagle, the ant, the dinosaur, every one of them existed inside him. He didn't know why this had happened. But one thing became completely clear to him. This would be his final life. And that thought brought him peace. Because at last, one day, he would truly be able to die. But for everyone watching, what they had just witnessed was pure madness. A small child killing someone with a single punch was impossible. One detective completely lost his temper and attacked Lee. Lee saw the attack coming. Even so, he allowed himself to be punched. He wanted to confirm his abilities once again. The moment the punch landed, he fell to the ground. But that pain helped him understand his limits even better. If he didn't activate his powers, he was just a normal human. The moment he understood that, he prepared for the next attack. This time, he activated the power of a turtle. The detective's punch became completely ineffective. Then Lee launched a counterattack that dislocated the detective's arm. He didn't even give him a chance to react. Then, using the strength of a chimpanzee, he delivered such a powerful blow that the detective nearly died. But suddenly, bang! A gunshot rang out. Lee couldn't even react. Before he could use a defensive ability, the bullet pierced straight through his human body. His vision started to blur, and he quickly collapsed to the ground. The criminal thought he had committed murder. Terrified, he ran away. Even the detectives didn't know what to do. They left Lee there and walked away. Morning was beginning to arrive. There was no one around. Lee was lying there alone, and the bullet had already torn through his organs. It seemed like this time he might not survive. But because of a jellyfish's instinct, his wounds began healing in a miraculous way. Lee was alive, but he wasn't happy. The immense power inside him had now started to frighten even him. As he stared into the distance, he could hear his mother's voice. She was calling out for him. But there was a strange emptiness inside him. While his mother desperately searched for him, Lee thought for a moment about leaving young Shil's life forever. But then he remembered his mother's love, the way she hugged him, and the tears she shed when he disappeared. He couldn't bring himself to leave her. His body was completely exhausted by now, and he collapsed onto the ground. At that very moment, his mother arrived there while searching for him. The instant she saw Lee, she ran over and pulled him tightly into her arms. She was crying. For the first time, that pure motherly love brought warmth to Lee's heart, which had been dry for centuries. And for the first time since being born, Lee opened his lips and said, "I love you, Mom." Meanwhile, at the police station, the criminal had already been captured. He tried to tell the police about Lee. But because of some hidden conspiracy, the detective gave a statement against the criminal instead. He was branded a liar, as if he were making up stories to reduce his punishment. And just like that, the secret of Lee's abilities remained hidden. After that day, whenever Lee went outside, his mother would hold his hand even more tightly. For a long time, young Shil protected him every moment. If a bully bothered him, she was ready to fight them. If neighbors said something bad about her son, she would go and answer them directly. If someone tried to take her place in the market, she would even protest against it. She was fighting the entire world for the sake of her son alone. Gradually, Lee began adapting to his human body and to human life. Now he had only one wish, to spend as much time as possible with his mother. But he knew that his existence was not normal. And an abnormal creature living alongside an ordinary human could become a danger to that person. And eventually, the very thing he feared the most happened. The detective who knew about Lee's powers returned. When he saw that Lee was still alive, he was overjoyed. Because now he could once again hunt the monster that had nearly killed him years ago. Then came the day when his mother fell ill. Lee told her that he was going to school. But in reality, he went to the market to sell the apples he had picked. And that was where the tragedy began. There, he ran into that same detective once again. This time, the detective directly accused him of being a spy and arrested him. To protect his family's peace, Lee closed his eyes and allowed the handcuffs to be placed on him. But the detective didn't stop there. He told Lee that if he was a spy, then his mother could also be a spy. And he sent people to investigate his sick and weak mother. That was the moment Lee finally lost his patience. His mother was the only reason he remained connected to human life. The moment he thought about her safety, he couldn't hold himself back. Even though he would be seen as a monster in front of the crowd, he shattered the handcuffs and sprinted toward home at full speed. In truth, this was exactly what the detective wanted. He had falsely accused a 12-year-old boy of being a spy so that Lee would be forced to reveal his true power. Now there was joy on his face. At last, the hunt had begun. But the detective had made a huge mistake. He only saw Lee as a monster. He had no idea that he was standing before an existence that could erase humanity from the face of the earth if it wanted to. Lee raced from the market to his home at lightning speed. But he was too late. Young Shil opened the door and saw several strangers trying to take her son away. Despite being sick, she shouted, called the neighbors, and begged for help to save her son. But the detectives, trapped in their misunderstanding, still believed she was a spy as well. So they showed her no mercy. Seeing her fierce resistance, they threw her to the ground. And at that very moment, the rage inside Lee exploded. With his overwhelming strength, within only a few breaths, those unfortunate detectives met their deaths at the hands of a 12-year-old boy. Lee was terrified. He thought that now his mother would see him as a monster just like everyone else. But that didn't happen. To young Shil, he was always just her son. Only her son. Faced with the detective's cruel accusations, she once again stood before him like a shield. She even took responsibility for the murders upon herself, even though she barely had enough strength left to eat properly. That unconditional love from his mother. That sacrifice. It pierced straight through Lee's heart, and for the first time in his entire life, Lee broke down and cried. He kept asking himself why his mother was doing so much for him. Why did she always put herself on the line to protect him? All his emotions surged inside him like a storm. And among the humans he had once hated, one human had now become his entire world. But young Shil's life was in danger. That twisted detective gave the order to aim at his mother. Lee immediately stepped in front of her. He had complete confidence in his powers. One after another, he stopped every bullet. The detectives were driven mad by fear and started firing continuously at the mother and son. But this time, young Shil could no longer bear watching her son endure everything alone. She stepped forward and became a shield in front of Lee herself. She knew that for a normal human, death was certain. Even so, without a moment of hesitation, she chose to protect her son. Taking her final breath beside him, she collapsed right there. But because of his extraordinary power, Lee was able to connect with his mother once more for a few brief moments. In that moment, young Shil supported him again, just as she always had. Lee told her that he no longer had any reason to live. He wanted to die so he could return to her as soon as possible. But young Shil made him promise her one final thing. No matter what happened, no matter what he did, he had to keep living. That was his mother's last wish. After his mother's death, Lee became convinced that he could never coexist with humans. His very existence was chaos. Either humans would kill him, or he would have to kill humans in order to survive. And to fulfill his mother's final wish, he made a decision. He would erase humanity from the earth. But he didn't want his mother to witness that massacre before her eyes. So he led the detectives far away from his home, toward a field of flowers. The very place connected to his most precious memories. After arriving there, Lee admitted that his existence itself was a huge mistake. But humans were no different. They too had broken, ruined, and destroyed nature. And for the first time, Lee understood why he might have been given this power. Perhaps the planet itself had given birth to him, so that he could push humanity to the brink of extinction. At least, that was the only explanation he had for his power. After leading the detectives away from his home, Lee punished the people who had taken away the most precious thing in his life. His power was completely overwhelming. He leaped down from above and crashed into their midst like a cannonball. Within seconds, almost everyone was dead. In the end, only their leader remained. And even he was barely breathing. Even while dying, he called Lee a monster. In response, Lee laughed and said, "You couldn't kill me, so now every human in this world will suffer under my rule." After saying that, he ended the man's life. Then he returned to his mother. He simply lifted her into his arms and kept walking without stopping. During that journey, every peaceful moment he had spent with his mother returned to his memories. Compared to his billions of years of life, those few years with his mother were incredibly short. But to Lee, they were his entire world. Endless love, happiness, peace. All of it existed only when his mother was by his side. And now she was gone. Because of him. Neither life nor death had ever caused him as much pain as this in any of his previous lives. Even so, he had to keep living. Because that was his mother's final wish. As he continued walking, he arrived at a strange place. There he met a hunter. When the hunter shot a bird, Lee was about to kill him. But the hunter asked him about his parents. And Lee stopped. When he learned that Lee's mother had died, the old man suddenly softened. He placed his coat over Lee's shoulders and took him to his home. There, only his elderly mother was waiting for him. Both of them treated Lee with great kindness. Their affection was sincere, and because of that, Lee's shattered trust in humanity slowly began to return. But their lives were very difficult. They barely had enough for themselves. So they couldn't properly take care of Lee. The next morning, the hunter took Lee into town to find a better place for him. On the way, Lee asked him about his mother. She could neither hear nor speak. Even so, the hunter talked to her every day. The hunter smiled and said, "Even though she can't hear and can't speak, she understands everything I want to say." That's the bond between a mother and her son. Hearing that made Lee feel a little lighter. But that happiness didn't last long. As they continued walking, a heavy rain suddenly began to fall. Both of them started looking for shelter. And then disaster struck. Recently, a company had cut down all the trees in that area for profit. As soon as the rain arrived, the ground weakened, and a massive landslide occurred. The hunter was buried in that landslide. Trapped beneath rocks and soil, he couldn't survive. Once again, Lee was watching someone he cared about die right before his eyes. His heart was shattered. Even so, he fulfilled the hunter's final wish. He carried his body back to his mother. But when the elderly woman saw her son's corpse, she couldn't bear the shock. Not long afterward, she passed away as well. Now two paths were fighting within Lee's heart. Should humanity be destroyed or not? He didn't know the answer. He was afraid of making the wrong choice. Then he remembered something his mother had once said. Even if you don't know the answer, keep trying. If you can't see the path ahead, choose the one that feels right. And even if you make a mistake, that's okay. Remembering those words, Lee made a decision. The company whose greed had taken the lives of two innocent people would be punished. He immediately went there, and with his overwhelming power, he wiped out everyone present. At that moment, he truly wanted to erase humanity. It wouldn't be easy, but he believed he could do it. Afterward, he visited their graves once again and then set out to push his abilities even further. He possessed the powers of all creatures. But one weakness still remained. If he didn't consciously activate his powers, he was no different from a normal human. So he began training himself. Years passed. During the first 5 years, he learned to keep his abilities active without thinking. Once, a train crashed into him, and he didn't move even slightly. His body had become as tough as a shell. The following year, he began communicating with all living creatures through telepathy. And that was when he discovered that most of Earth's creatures actually liked humans. That realization deeply disturbed him. Then another 5 years passed. Then 10 more. And Lee became a terrifying existence. A mature human body combined with unimaginable strength. Now he could react to any danger without even thinking. And the most shocking thing was that he could no longer communicate only with living creatures. He could talk to the earth, the water, the trees, and even the life that existed within them. He had become connected to the earth. And the earth was in pain because humans were slowly killing it. Another 30 years passed. His abilities had become almost limitless. He could combine multiple powers at once and accomplish impossible things. Now, if he wanted, he could wipe out humanity at any moment. Simply by transferring heat into the ground, building up pressure, and repeating the same process again and again, he could create an earthquake powerful enough to split the earth into two. All 6 continents would break apart. Half of them would sink into the oceans. And perhaps not a single human would survive. Lee could do all of this. He had even planned it. But he was still hesitating. Because humans were not only cruel. Among them were people like his mother. There was also someone like the hunter. After 47 years of loneliness, he made a decision. He shouldn't rush things. He would continue to observe and understand more. Only then would he decide what was truly right. But wherever he went, he saw signs of humanity's destruction. One day, he saw a beautiful forest filled with flowers being cut down to build a road for traffic. The sight filled Lee with rage. Using only a tiny fraction of his power, he completely destroyed the entire road. At first, he didn't care about the driver who was on that road. But then he saw the driver's face and froze. Her face looked incredibly similar to his mother's. Without thinking, he rushed to save her. But at that exact moment, a falling rock struck him on the head. As he fell, even he was shocked. Why hadn't he protected himself with his powers? Then he realized that seeing the face of that unknown woman, which resembled his mother so much, had completely shaken him for a moment. And because of that distraction, he lost consciousness. For the first time, despite possessing such immense power, he lay there injured like an ordinary human. That rock had almost taken Lee's life. Just when Lee thought he had died, he opened his eyes again. His head surgery had been successful, and he regained consciousness quickly. But when he woke up, everything had changed. Lee had lost most of his memories. Only vague fragments remained. The only thing he remembered was his name, Lee. Other than that, he couldn't tell anyone anything about himself. The police investigated, but found nothing. Even his fingerprints weren't registered anywhere. It was as if that person had never officially existed in this world. Eventually, the police asked Lisu to become his caretaker. And she took him home with her. Now, Lisu had become his guardian. From the outside, Lee looked around 24 years old. Meanwhile, Lisu was 34. One day, while talking, Lisu told him that he should speak to her a little more politely. Although in reality, Lee's age was probably over 3.05 billion years. Perhaps because of some maternal connection buried within his old memories, Lee often wanted to hold Lisu's hand. While they were looking for work and a place to live, he kept trying to hold her hand. At first, Lisu hesitated a little. But she couldn't refuse the boy who had once saved her life. The moment she allowed Lee to hold her hand, tears suddenly began flowing from his eyes. He himself didn't know why. Later, Li Su helped him get a server job at her friend's cafe. At first, her friend was hesitant, because Li's way of speaking was strange. It sounded as though he were imitating an accent. But eventually, he hired him. Although Li wanted to stay with Li Su, he still had to work at the cafe. Meanwhile, Li Su was busy with environmental research. One day, she was in a hurry and left her dog behind. But she was surprised to see that her dog became attached to Li incredibly quickly. And something even more shocking happened. When Li touched the dog, a mysterious power awakened inside him once again. Because of that power, he sensed something strange inside a vehicle from Li Su's research facility. A mysterious creature that even he himself didn't know about. Intense emotions were coming from that creature, and the strongest of them was hatred toward humans. Meanwhile, at the research facility, scientists were studying Hydra organisms. Organisms capable of regenerating an entire body from even a tiny piece of themselves. Almost like cancer. Their goal was to create a protein that could stop this regeneration process, allowing them to find a cure for cancer. Recently, the facility had discovered a new species of Hydra. They named it Steer. It possessed the same terrifying regenerative ability. The scientists saw it as nothing more than a test subject. They had absolutely no idea that its instincts were connected to humanity's extinction. Now, two different creatures existed on Earth with the same objective. One was trapped inside a laboratory. The other had lost his memories. Meanwhile, Li was trying to adapt to life at the cafe. He was told that whenever there were few customers, he should read the books kept there. Under the cafe owner's guidance, he quickly learned how to serve customers. And because of his handsome appearance, the number of customers began increasing rapidly. The cafe sales suddenly rose, making Li Su's friend very happy. To celebrate Li settling in, Li Su invited him and her friend out for drinks. At first, Li didn't like the bitter taste of beer at all. But when he learned that people reveal their true nature when they get drunk, his curiosity grew. And before long, he got drunk himself. While returning home, Li was behaving a little differently because of the alcohol. As they walked, they saw fireflies glowing in the night. It was Li's first time seeing them. He became fascinated by them. But in his drunken state, he accidentally activated his instincts. And suddenly, his own body began glowing like a firefly. Seeing this, Li Su got scared and stepped back in panic. But she didn't realize that there was no path behind her. She began falling toward a steep slope. At that very moment, Li rushed toward her with predator-like speed and saved her. The next morning, Li Su was introduced to Steer at the facility. There were 14 specimens in total. 13 of them were samples separated from a single mother organism. During an experiment, the team leader poured acid onto the mother specimen. But surprisingly, the acid was poured only on the mother. Even so, all 13 remaining specimens reacted as if they were connected. This completely confused the research team. Were these 14 separate organisms? Or were they all parts of a single organism? No one had an answer to that question. That same morning, Li Su also spoke to the team leader about Li. His response made her tremble. He said, "If a person like Li really exists, then he's not human. He should be a research subject for the advancement of humanity." As soon as her shift ended, Li Su went straight to Li and asked him about his powers. Li answered honestly. If he wanted, he could become anything. But if Li Su didn't like it, then he would never do it. Then Li Su asked him another question. If all of his memories returned, what would he do? For a few seconds, it was as if Li drifted outside himself. Without thinking, he replied, "I would drive humanity to extinction." Hearing that, Li Su fell completely silent. She was shocked. But the most frightening part was that a few seconds later, Li himself didn't remember what he had just said. Li Su was completely confused. What exactly was the person standing before her? What were his true intentions? She couldn't understand. And to uncover the truth, she presented Li with a contract. From that moment on, Li was going to become Li Su's research subject. There was no pressure on him. Even so, Li signed the contract without hesitation. And that very night, his condition became terrible. He had to endure Li Su's experiments throughout the entire night. As a result, he was completely exhausted the next morning. When he met the cafe owner, Li Su's colleagues had already finished analyzing the data collected from Li's biological samples. But everyone was shocked by the results. According to their findings, Li was completely normal. There was nothing unusual inside him. But Li Su refused to believe it. After everything she had seen with her own eyes, she knew Li couldn't possibly be a normal human. No matter what conclusion her colleagues reached, Lee remained a mystery beyond human understanding in her eyes. But she still couldn't understand him. Then something strange happened. As Lee Su walked past the lab where steer specimens were being kept while carrying a vial of Lee's blood, the first specimen suddenly reacted violently. A few seconds later, Steer escaped from the laboratory. At that exact moment, Lee sensed danger from far away. Panic erupted inside the lab. The staff hurriedly began moving the test tubes. But then Steer bit the team leader. And immediately after the bite, that Steer specimen suddenly died. The surprising thing was that even after the mother specimen died, the remaining specimens were completely unaffected. Meanwhile, the moment he was bitten, the team leader's body began trembling. Then he collapsed unconscious. When Lee Su later approached him with a blood vial, his body, under Steer's influence, suddenly attacked her. But right at that moment, Lee arrived there. He knocked the team leader unconscious and immediately took him to the hospital. Later, Lee Su asked him how he knew she was there. Lee had no answer. He didn't know himself. He only knew one thing. The place where Lee Su worked was extremely dangerous. Meanwhile, inside the medical vehicle, the team leader was still unconscious. But it seemed as if Steer was controlling his body. And not just him. Another co-worker who had received only a minor scratch was also beginning to show changes. It was as if Steer was spreading. Lee wanted Lee Su to stay away from that workplace for her own safety. He couldn't explain the reason to her. Even so, Lee Su trusted his words. And she decided to resign. This wasn't only because she trusted what Lee had said. It was also because his test results had already disturbed her. According to those results, Lee appeared completely normal. But his perception was far sharper than that of an ordinary human. So sharp that his instincts could be trusted. And there was something else Lee Su had noticed. Lee cared deeply about her. But toward everyone else, there was a strange sense of distance and dislike inside him. She didn't know the reason. Even so, she decided to observe Lee more closely. Meanwhile, the research team leader lying in the hospital had already realized that something was terribly wrong inside him. His consciousness kept disappearing, then returning. According to the doctors, he was perfectly fine. But he knew that something inside him had changed. And there was only one reason for it. Steer. Now he wanted to return to the lab to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, at the lab, the researcher who had previously been scratched was bitten by a mosquito. Perhaps that was the beginning of an even greater disaster. On the other side, Lee Su told Lee that if he continued like this with his powers and mindset, humanity might genuinely go extinct one day. She was convinced that something enormous had happened to Lee before he lost his memories. But the strange thing was that it didn't really bother her. Because she herself wasn't very happy with humans either. There was only one question on her mind. Why was Lee so different when it came to her? Lee couldn't answer that himself. He only knew that he liked Lee Su very much. And if she wanted to see his powers, he could show them to her. A little later, Lee Su witnessed something with her own eyes that no human could probably even imagine. All the marine creatures around them were moving according to Lee's will. Not only living creatures. He could control the entire ocean as well. At first, Lee Su was frightened. But Lee told her there was no need to be afraid. The earth and the wind are always with you. Just feel them. Then nothing will seem frightening. Lee Su calmed herself and began to feel nature around her. And sure enough, her fear gradually turned into excitement. Everything Lee was showing her seemed incredible. She knew that the person standing before her was a ticking time bomb. She didn't know his past. She didn't know his limits. Even so, as his guardian, she made a decision. If he truly had a role, then it was to stop humans from harming the planet. When Lee heard this, he became very happy. He felt that even if his memories returned, there might no longer be any reason to destroy the world. Because the person he loved wanted to save this world. But on the other side, the situation was becoming even more dangerous. The research team leader was still lying in bed. But he was certain that Steer's main body was still alive inside him. And through his nervous system, it was continuously connecting with more and more people. Every moment, the number of connected individuals was increasing. Rapidly. Uncontrollably. Now it wasn't thousands anymore. Hundreds of thousands of people had become part of the network. Around 280,000 people had already become Steer's hosts. And through them, messages were reaching the main body. But the most terrifying message was only one. The annihilation of all humanity. To stop this, the team leader returned to the facility and dismissed most of the staff. He also forbade the remaining employees from entering his office. Locked inside his private room, he recorded all the information into a folder before he completely lost control of himself. But it didn't take long. Steer's influence slowly began breaking down his consciousness. Hatred toward human society started filling his mind. Now he couldn't even tell whether he was controlling Steer or Steer was controlling him. Only one thought remained in his head. Humans must be eliminated. And he had been chosen to start a new world. During this time, the United States proposed a new Green Accord policy to protect nature. Its goal was also to save humanity. The team leader had several supporters of that policy murdered. He could control people infected by Steer according to his will. He could even order them to commit suicide. But Steer's plan didn't last very long. Because Lee had found his location. The real reason was a mosquito. Just as it was about to bite Lee-Soo, Lee noticed something strange about it. Because of his instincts, he immediately understood. This was the very danger he had been wary of all this time. In the beginning, the research team leader's own consciousness had still remained inside him. But he had already become a twisted person. Then, the moment Lee arrived there, Steer's main body completely took over him. And at that very moment, the battle between the two most powerful creatures on Earth officially began. When Lee had attacked Steer before, Steer had remained silent. Because back then, he wasn't powerful enough. But now things had changed. After failing to convince Lee to destroy humanity, Steer ordered his infected followers to attack him. But he had severely underestimated Lee's strength. Against billions of years of instincts and the powers of countless creatures, all of this was child's play for Lee. With a single physical impact, he blasted Steer away. Then Lee grabbed the human body that Steer was controlling, threw it into the sky, and slammed it into a remote area like a toy. But there was one problem. As long as Steer remained inside the research team leader's body, killing him was impossible. Lee struck him several more times. But every wound healed within moments. Steer even tried to enter Lee's cells. But that failed as well. He couldn't believe that Lee's raw power could stop a creature like him. A being capable of controlling all other living creatures. After that, Steer sent numerous infected creatures nearby to attack Lee. But the result was the same. Lee used only a small amount of force, and all of them collapsed before him. Then he launched Steer into the air and delivered a direct punch. A punch so powerful that it blasted a huge hole through part of the body Steer was controlling. Now Steer understood. Winning a direct battle against the monster standing before him was impossible. But he didn't care. Because he knew Lee's greatest weakness. Or rather, the weakness of the memory loss version of Lee. Immediately, he summoned a flock of crows. But this time, their target wasn't Lee. They attacked Steer's own host instead. And amid that chaos, Steer transferred his main body into one of the crows and escaped. The research team leader collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. His regenerative ability was almost completely gone. Before dying, he tried to tell Lee about the folder he had left behind. But Lee's attention was elsewhere. His only concern was Lee-Soo's safety. Meanwhile, on the other side, the cafe owner suddenly began choking Lee-Soo. She herself could feel that she was losing control. She told Lee-Soo to run. But Lee-Soo couldn't understand what was happening. Then more controlled people started gathering there. Their objective was clear. To make Lee-Soo Steer's new host. But Lee arrived at exactly the right moment. And once again, he saved Lee-Soo. He was forced to attack the cafe owner. He felt extremely guilty about it. But he had no other choice. At the same time, people all around the world began experiencing strange neurological symptoms. The government assumed it was an infectious disease and began searching for its cause. People with mild symptoms reported seeing images and words inside their minds. And in those images, the same face kept appearing again and again. A Korean woman with long hair. Lee-Soo. Medical experts named the disease wave. Its early symptoms included mild muscle contractions that gradually stole control of the entire body. A live streamer accidentally recorded it while streaming with his infected friend. At first, he thought his friend was joking to gain more views. But the truth was far more terrifying. He was genuinely under Steer's control. And along with the other infected people, he was moving toward Lee-Soo's location. Meanwhile, Lee and Lee-Soo had become surrounded from all sides. Defeating Lee was impossible.